Perfect. Okay, so preparing for Passover. My friends, with Rosh Chodesh Nisan coming to an end, it looks like Pesach is just about 15 days away or so, or 14 days or so away. And so we have to prepare. Now, I'm assuming, yes, I can make the PowerPoint available for people who would like to see it afterwards. All right. So many people love Pesach for a variety of different reasons or for a combination of reasons. Can everyone see the screen, by the way? Great. Number one, it's a peak moment during the year. And that means for many of us, this is the only time of the year when our entire family gets together. This is the moment where everybody sets time aside and it feels special. People leave work, people travel to be here for this particular holiday in a way where they don't do it for Purim or Shavuot or other holidays. Also, for many of us, Pesach is the one time of the year where family gets together to do specifically Jewish things. And so there's like a cultural and religious element to the holiday that can't always be replaced with other things. And so there's a sense of loss of not being able to celebrate specifically Pesach. Maybe the family can get together in 3 months and go to Disney World, but it feels different than getting together for Pesach. For many people, it's also a memory-making and meaning-making experience. Many of us look forward to Pesach as a chance to create new memories. So in 6 months, we'll say, oh, remember when so-and-so spilled all the wine on the table, right? Oh, that was such a funny memory. Or, oh, it was our chance to see our new grandchild or our new niece or nephew. And so Pesach is meaningful to so many people for different reasons that you just can't replace by making it up a little bit later. There's also, or by doing it through Zoom or by calling or things like that. Someone mentioned to me that Pesach is the one time of the year that their family comes in internationally where they get to like hold their grandkids and give them kisses and snuggle with them. And that can't be replicated through the computer. It's also, there's a food piece to this, that there are special recipes that we only tend to eat on Passover. There are certainly family rituals and traditions that you want to get passed down from generation to generation, and it only happens when you're able to sit down at the Seder table together. And again, these are all reasons why we love this holiday in particular. And I imagine for many of you, these are things you're not going to have them, and that's hard. And then finally, Pesach is also fun, right? Regardless of all of the complaining we do about, oh, I had to drive to this place to get this spice, or oh, it took me 6 hours to make the brisket, right? We actually enjoy it, right? And as much as we complain about cleaning for Pesach, there's something therapeutic in that process as well. And so the reason I'm just making all of this explicit is that I want us all to be aware that as I answer some of these questions about what to do this year for Pesach, different people are gonna need different things. And what might be your issues might not be my issues. And so part of the presentation this evening is hoping to tackle some of these issues and maybe how to make them a little bit more bearable. This year is going to be different. The Seders are going to be smaller, and it's probably not going to be with your extended family. It's not going to be with the friends that you've been having Seder with for the past 25 years. And all of this produces feelings of sadness, and honestly, feelings of grief, and feelings of loss, and feelings of anxiety. And these are real feelings. And in these times when things feel so turbulent and out of control, to not be able to like hold on to something that is so meaningful to us adds to that sense of loss. And I just want to give voice to that. And I want to give all of us permission and an awareness that it's okay to feel all of these things. And as we prepare for the holiday, all of these things, you put all of this together, it also might mean that you're not in the mood to do Pesach, right? And that you just don't feel like doing it. You're not able to get outside help either on the nights of the Seder itself, or you're not able to have help in preparing for Pesach. And honestly, we don't have time, right? We're all busy trying to figure out how to juggle all the different things that are now being thrust upon our lives, and having to add on arguably a really complicated holiday just adds a lot more stress to an already really stressful experience. So having said all of that, knowing all of the things that we're feeling, I want to try to answer this big question and maybe allow us to pivot. I know I'm in a place where I'm ready to pivot, others might not be. And the question is, if Passover can't be what it was for this year, right? Let's make it different, special, and memorable. And that's where I am. And in many ways, this Pesach presents new opportunities in ways that we haven't had the chance to experience before. And one way of thinking of this is, how many of you have ever been at a Seder where you say, oh, if I were doing the Seder, I would do it totally different. This is the year you can really do the Seder any way you want. And for those of you who have gone to Seders where it feels like it's geared towards the adults and you have younger kids in your family or will be at your Seder younger, you can gear it towards that specific demographic. And if you said, oh, we've always wanted to discuss these really complicated high-level ideas, but we can't do it because XYZ reason, this might be the year you can actually have the Seder of your dreams. And I'm asking us to try to find a way to almost hold the sadness of not having the Seder that we've always had, and also be able to acknowledge that maybe there are new opportunities this year because of our particular circumstances. So why even celebrate the holiday? And number one, it's not just about family, right? And it's not just about getting together with community members. Pesach is more than that. And I think the message of Pesach is actually critically important and vital to us at this particular time of our lives. The idea of a people who are downtrodden and facing all kinds of calamity, being able to overcome their difficulties and arrive to a place of redemption in the future might be a lesson. I don't have to paint it so clearly, might be a really valuable lesson for us in terms of this idea that maybe better things, that we will eventually overcome this. Number two, I think celebrating Pesach gives us a sense of normalcy. This is something that we look forward to. It's a part of who we are, and it has been something that has given us strength over the years. And so let's allow Pesach to have that power over us as well. Number three, it's still a memory-making experience. I promise you, next year at Pesach, we will all talk about how next year's Pesach is so different from this year's Pesach. And some of us will be able to say, oh, you know what we did? You know what I learned this Pesach that was so meaningful to me? I now want to bring that back to regular life a year later. And so this is a new tradition I want to bring into our family practice. And finally, and maybe this is weird for the rabbi to put last, it's also a mitzvah, right? It's also a sacred obligation, and it's part of what makes us who we are as part of the Jewish people. And so there's also that element as well that I don't want to miss or acknowledge. I want to pause for a moment here, and I just want to get any reflections, any reactions to any of the things I said. Does it resonate? Are you not in this place? I want to pause for, I just want to acknowledge there's a bunch of people here, so if we can keep our answers brief and succinct, and so that way multiple people can answer and give space. So if you want to share something, just raise your hand, and I'll find you, and I will unmute you, and then we'll continue. Just looking around. Anyone? All right, Marilyn, you have the stage. Marilyn, X takes the square.
What do I?
Just talk. Just talk.
This year I'm getting stuff from Deb Blazer, and I'm having a Seder for one, which will be very interesting. So
my rabbi always says, whenever someone uses the word interesting, you should ask them what they really mean by interesting. Because people have always said, you know, oh, what an interesting haircut. What an interesting outfit. What an interesting baby, right? And so we're going to sort of look into what that means. Any other comment? We're going to get in there, Marilyn. Thank you. Any other observations or comments people want to make? All right, Naomi. I don't hear you. I unmuted you, Naomi, but I don't hear you. Try again. If you want to chat, if you want to type what you want to say in the chat box, we'll come back to that, okay? Any other comments? Audrey? Hold on, maybe it's me.
Okay. No, I got it. I think you can hear me.
Is that you, Audrey?
Yes, that's me.
Go for it, yes.
I was just going to say this resonates totally with me because I was expecting relatives from other cities and friends, and now it's going to be immediate family, and it's the first time I'm making Seder, so it's been very stressful. So to turn that around as an opportunity is really helpful.
By show of hands, how many of you, thank you, by show of hands, how many of you are hosting a Seder for the first time? That's over there. Let's move my panel. So a handful of you, okay. All right, so let's take a look at what we're gonna do, how we're gonna make this awesome, and how I'm gonna give you some practical pieces of advice that will hopefully make all of, oh, sorry, I'm looking at the comments. I'm alone in my house and I was planning to join my sister and her family in Mom in Maryland. Because we can't do that, we'll do Passover by Zoom. halachic or not, I think it's the best solution for our family. To us, togetherness is everything. Okay. Okay, Naomi, I see you. So yes, Beth, we're going to talk about Zoom Seders in a second. All right, come on, Ronnie, go ahead.
Just that it seems so strange because my kids are and their families are in Cranston and Warwick, but because everyone says they shouldn't be with us because we're over 60 and all this, so it's going to be strange. But what I'm thinking is I would maybe make their favorite, maybe not the turkey, but the simmus and maybe some other things, and then either we drop it off or they come and we put it on the porch so they have it, and then try to do it by either Zoom or what is it, FaceTiming or something.
So you'll be able to still have the same food. You can share the foods online. You can share the foods in real life.
I think so. I think we could do that. At least some of it, some of it will do. Soup, I don't know how that would travel, but we could see if there's a way to do it. I'll make the.
All right, thank you. Naomi, did you want to share something?
Thank you. I don't know why I was still muted. I was just going to say that if you're by yourself, it makes a bigger difference, I think, this year. I mean, I've led my own seders and so on, but there are people around and there won't be anyone, period.
Yeah, right. And so even if you've hosted before, you've never hosted like this, and that feels different. Yeah. Oh, you are right. You are, and I can't change that. You are 100% right. You are 100% right. I never, even my smallest Seder was when Shana was pregnant, and we had Seder for 6. And even that is different from what we're doing this year, right? So I'm going to give practical advice, what I think is practical. You'll decide for yourselves if it is. And so here we go. Cleaning and preparing for Passover. Number 1, getting rid of HAMETZ. We'll do a little bit of learning. And remember, if you need to get my attention, just put something in the chat box, because that's how I'll see that you want to say something. We'll start with the MISHNAH and Psachim, right? This is a code of Jewish law written over nearly 2,000 years ago. And it says, Or le'arba asar bodkin et hachametz le'or haner. On the 14th of the night of Nisan, you search the house for HAMETZ. This is the ritual of bidikat HAMETZ, of going around with the wooden spoon. With the wooden spoon and the feather and all of that. And the Mishnah continues, Kol makon she'ein machnisin bo chametz, any spot where you don't actually put chametz, ein tzarich b'dika. You don't actually have to search there. And so what's nice about this Mishnah is it says when you're doing and preparing your house for Passover, you don't have to clean your entire house. You don't have to go through everything and empty out, take your yellow pages and shift them out and stuff like that, right? The idea is you only have to clean wherever chametz typically can be found. And so, in typical years, you always hear about the competition of oh, I lift up my floorboards and I clean under the floorboards to find any chametz, or I do all of these things so I can I open up all my kids' toys and I clean out the money or all the pieces by hand. You don't really need to do that. Right, and I want to, hopefully hearing from me can alleviate some of the stress that comes from some of the Pesach cleaning. And I'm just going to read to you directly what is written in this Rabbinical Assembly Guide, which I will be giving you a link to in a little bit. It says very clearly, how much do I have to clean? For those people who want to clean and want to do what you typically do, go right ahead. You should do what you would typically do and what you've grown accustomed. But I'll highlight this. But the general rule is, places must be well searched only and specifically cleaned for chametz only if it's a place for which and in which chametz is normally consumed and cooked. Right. Furthermore, any chametz, the shmutz only applies to a piece of pure chametz the size of a kazan, right, the size of an olive. And then this is your yearly reminder that dirt is not chametz and Pesach cleaning is not spring cleaning. And so I see many of you are laughing, right, because many of us take on this extra burden of doing all of this extra work when you don't really need to. And especially in a year where we are feeling more stressed, I hope this serves as permission to really think about where do we put food in the house, right? What spaces are the ones that I actually do have to clean? Because part of the theme you're gonna notice this evening isn't COVID is making our lives crazy, Pesach is off, I'll do whatever, I don't care, right? You can still be very thoughtful in how you go about preparing for Pesach, because I actually think part of the preparing helps you on Seder night. And so I'll be blunt what my family cleaning plan is. We don't eat food in our basement. We don't eat food in the second floor or the third floor. If the takeaway from this evening is the rabbi has a third floor, it's a converted attic, just so you know. But we don't eat in any of those spaces. So I don't plan on cleaning those spaces any more intensely than I typically do. Shane is probably thinking, we don't know, okay. We don't eat in our family room, and the main places we eat is the dining room and the kitchen. And so we're gonna wipe down the shelves and cover the countertops. We'll close off the cabinets that we aren't using, put a little ribbon on the handles of the cabinets we don't use as a reminder. And we'll kosher the sink and the oven and some other things like that. But it's not a crazy experience, right? And it doesn't have to be that you're exhausted from doing it. And like, unless your fingers are raw from like all of the cleaning, you don't get to sit down at your Seder table. You just need to make sure the house feels like you made an effort, right? Pots and pans. In my family, we actually have like a full set of pots and pans and all those things. We keep ours in the basement. And honestly, I plan on schlepping up whatever it is that we just need for the week. I don't plan on swapping out all my cabinets and switching everything. We'll do only the things that we really need to do. And this is a phrase, if you're for people who are looking for leniency. Again, if you are somebody who like wants to do this, great. But if you're saying, look, I can't hire the person who I normally do to come and schlep the pots and pans up the stairs, and I just don't have the capacity to do all of this right now. I'm too busy running a homeschooling or watching, right? This is advice straight from the RA guide, which I'll share with you in a little bit, right? If there's no enabled body, these surfaces should be wiped down with all-purpose cleaning materials. The refrigerator shelves should be wiped down, and if the oven will be used during Passover, the walls of the oven should be wiped down and aluminum foil placed between the rack and the baking dish, right? For homes in which vessels will not be able to be koshered in the normal manner, right? We're not saying, forget about it, don't do anything. What the RA is suggesting is you, before Pesach, find a couple of dishes, you clean them thoroughly. You let them rest for 24 hours, right? And then, so long as they don't have visible food on them, they are acceptable for preparing Pesach food. And this technique can also be used for cutlery and non-porous dishes. And one of the things that I appreciate about this advice that we're getting from the RA, and I can, if you want to, I can go into the background of why this technically works, right? And that's because there are lots of leniencies that we as a people, we can use, but we have chosen not to because we think it'll make us a little bit lazier and a little bit more lax with kashrut, so we become a little bit more uptight about it. But in this year where we don't have the time, I would love for people to say, you know what, I don't have capacity, and so I'm not doing anything. I'm gonna be thoughtful, and the night before Pesach, or 2 days before Pesach, I'm not gonna use these pots and these pans, and so I've created the intention of setting them aside, and I'm still gonna have Pesach pots and pans and dishes and cutlery for the year. Again, this advice is if it's really complicated for people to do this. If I missed a spot in the cleaning, let's say you've done the preparing and you've done everything and you think you're set, I want to remind everybody that when it comes to Pesach, the night before Passover, you can join me on TETV and actually do Bidikat HAMETZ with me and my family, where you walk around with the candlestick, you walk around with a wooden spoon, and we actually say a phrase on the night before Pesach and in the morning, where we actually say, all chametz in my position which I have not seen or removed, or which I am unaware, is hereby nullified and ownerless as the dust of the earth. And in the morning, we'll actually say, all chametz in my possession, whether I've seen it or not, whether I have removed it or not, is hereby nullified and rendered ownerless as the dust of the earth, right? And so this, the rabbis put in there, it's sort of like your stopgap measure, right? I did the best I could. I really did. I tried. I did what I could. And now I'm saying any chametz, which, like, you know, one of my kids left a Cheerio under the couch, which there's always a Cheerio in the couch, right? And like as one of my rabbis once said, he said, I went to take my car in for Pesach cleaning. He said, my grandkids visited 6 months ago. There's still Cheerios in my car. Like, I don't know where they went. I don't know where they keep coming from, right? But that's sort of like, we did our best effort, and whatever happens, happens. Hold on, I got some new messages. Yes. Leigh and Kenny say, be careful cleaning the oven. It might fry the entire electrical panel. You speak from experience. Oh yeah, okay. What about one's car? You should try to do the best you can. You can clean it, you can vacuum it, put it in the washing machine. Again, I think this is a matter of people trying the best they can. You can, of course, also sell your HAMETZ. Should be one of the things that you do. You can sell your HAMETZ to me, and then I'm going to sell it to someone else. But that's one thing you could do as a way of honoring Pesach, right? And saying this is the best I can do for this year. And it might be next year when we have more time and things are different, we'll do things a little differently. But this is advice for this year. Now, the food on Passover itself. This, I think, can be a lot of fun, right? Remember that there's a whole principle in Judaism called bitul, right? Or mevatel, making things, you can nullify things. And so usually the way it works, if you have 1/60th of something that's not kosher and a 60th of something that is, the whole thing becomes kosher, right? So it's 1/60. That's the ratio, right? And you can't do it on purpose, right? So you can't like on purpose take 59 ounces of, I don't know if I'm doing the math right, 59 ounces of meat and put like 1 ounce of cheese on top, or 60 ounces of meat and 1 ounce of cheese because you want to cheese. You can't do it on purpose. By accident, it's okay, right? And so if something is not supposed to be, if there's a little bit of HAMETZ in your food before Pesach, you can nullify it. And after Passover starts, you can't. And this is why there's the practice of you buy milk before Pesach, because if there happened to be an oat that accidentally fell into the vat of the milk or something along those lines, it becomes nullified. If the vitamins or the enriched stuff that goes into the milk is not kosher for Pesach, it gets blended into the milk, and therefore it's okay. And that's why on Pesach, there's a practice of buying kosher for Passover milk. That's the shifting that's taking place. And that's ideally how things work, and that's how much of the Jewish world worked. And then over time, things got a little bit more complicated, right? And so for this year's Pesach list, the RA, the Rabbinical Assembly, has put out a list of things that traditionally you buy with a kosher for Passover certification, that this year, not just this year, but realistically, you never needed to buy a kosher Pesach X, Y, or Z. But because of how we as a community have evolved, we've made it our practice to get specific things that are kosher Pesach. But this year, because we don't want to spend a lot of time going from supermarket to supermarket, or because there's not a lot of products, there might not be the same number of products available, they've given you sort of a guidance on which products are safe bets. And so a couple of examples of this that I think are really helpful for this year are non-flavored cream cheese with ingredients of milk and cream and the stabilizers and all that. You don't need kosher Pesach specific cream cheese. You don't need kosher Pesach yogurt, right? That's plain yogurt, right? You can get regular canned tuna. You can get regular hard cheeses, right? You can get regular frozen fruit, regular cottage cheese, regular things like that, which I think can make life a lot easier and hopefully a lot less stressful. Now, what's interesting about this is, halachically speaking, we could have always done this, right? This is not a leniency specifically where we're saying, the rules are different this year. This has always been one of the rules. It's just Pesach is a combination of people wanting to be more strict than typical, and also we live in a world where we can actually afford to do a lot of these things, right? And so I think that's part of this. But again, this full list will be available in the link that I share with you later, right? Let me go back in here. And there's more, right? If you have products in your homes that are HAMETZ free or pretty much HAMETZ free, right? Then, and it's open, you can use them during the year. And I think a good example of this is spices, right? If you have, what? That you can use them during, you can hear, right? That if you have spices that you've opened, pepper, salt, pepper, paprika, whatever, name your things, right? If you have one open and it's not kosher Pesach and the ingredient is just that stuff, you can go ahead and use those things, which I actually think are is a nice leniency, right? Is a nice thing to be able to do. All right. All of this is, of course, assumes, I see David Leach is now at Stop and Shop, right? All of this assumes that you don't want to expand your palate. If you are willing to eat kitniot, right? And as a reminder, kitniot is not chametz. Kitniot is like an extra stringency that was taken on in the Ashkenaz community, which back a few years ago, the conservative movement said anybody who wants to eat kitniot can eat kitniot. Even the Ashkenazim in Israel, they now, many of them are eating kitniot. And so it's something that if you're willing to explore just for this year, maybe this year can be your gateway year to kitniot, right? It can expand your entire menu. That means you can have rice, beans, corn, peanuts, right? So imagine for Pesach, if one of the stresses is what am I going to feed my kids or my nieces or nephew or my grandkids, or what am I going to eat? Peanut butter and jelly on matzah sounds really good to me, right? Having rice and beans sounds good. Corn on the cob, hummus, those kinds of things. And if you're saying, oh, I never had that stuff over Pesach, that's not Pesach, I want to push back and say, maybe this is what Pesach looks like this year. And just because you do it this year doesn't mean you do it next year. But I'm trying to find ways to make Pesach more so it can really feel like a joyful holiday and not something that we have to try to get through. If you take the idea of nullification, that if there's stuff in your food that is negligible and you take it to the nth degree, and you are also willing to eat kitniot, there's a rabbi named Yitzchak Abadi, who every year he makes a list of food and ingredients that he's investigated and his sons have investigated. And based on the ingredients and these principles that he follows, he has a very permissive list. There is stuff on there that it's amazing. Regular Heinz ketchup, Hunt's ketchup, peanut butter, even ice cream. I mean, like the list is really expansive. And if you want to be uber flexible, there are lots of really interesting things on there. If there's stuff on the list which doesn't make sense to you, I encourage you to reach out directly to that rabbi and ask him how certain things got on the list. There are a lot of people mulling over this list. It's shared in lots of communities. And so you can ask him any questions you have. I will say this is one of those moments where the letter of the law and the spirit of the law is something that you might want to look into. I'll give you an example. I forget which brand, but some of the things that he recommends are you can go out and get ice cream. Like I forget which flavors of ice cream, but like I think it's Breyers. So you'll look it up. I don't know if it's Breyer. For me, like the idea of eating Breyers ice cream on Pesach feels like that can't be right, right? And even if it is halakhically valid, fine. I don't. It feels too different for me. And so I encourage each person to figure out for themselves where does that lie. You'll notice this year lots of rabbis are giving different opinions on what's okay and what's not okay and what people should do. And so see what different rabbis say, see what he says and see sort of what resonates with you. I like to remind everyone that just because one rabbi says one thing that you like, probably doesn't mean you like everything that rabbi likes. And so just be mindful of saying like, well, this rabbi says this. You can say like, he also said X, Y, and Z, right? And so it's always a mixed bag. So that's that. The menu, whereas many people like to see how complicated can the recipes be and whatnot, I'm encouraging everyone to keep it simple this year. Hamburgers, chicken, potato, rice, beans, salad, fresh fruit, eggs, baked potatoes, yogurt, cottage cheese. There's no need, right? If the Seder is for one or for two, you don't have to cook a 7-course meal, right? It's okay to have like sort of a more mellow kind of Seder, right? I remember once someone said, I think it was one of our kids said, we're doing Pesach just like our ancestors did. And that was immediately followed up by saying, can you pass the quinoa and the like other exotic dish that like we had crafted that year? And I'm willing to bet, people weren't having all these exotic dishes in the shtetl, right? They were having pretty basic recipes and pretty basic meals. And so it's okay to tone it down for a year and try to eat more simplistically. You can still make it feel special, but having more basic foods. This piece of advice I think is helpful. Eat whatever, whenever, right? There's no reason you have to try to replicate what breakfast typically looks like on Pesach. If you are in Costa Rica for breakfast, that's the picture there. That's a typical breakfast. Rice, beans, eggs, and plantains, right? Have it for breakfast. Why not? Have smoothies, have chicken, have like whatever you're in the mood for. And in fact, if you want to tell people we're going to have like, dinner for breakfast and breakfast for dinner, be creative. Sort of, you don't have to limit yourself. And that could actually be kind of fun. And then all of this finally is also and then the next thing is, I think all of this advice of planning your menu in a more thoughtful way, of thinking of the food and cleaning and the dishes and having intention as we prepare for Pesach, I think helps you enjoy the holiday a little bit more. As we pivot and think about what Pesach could look like, I want to highly encourage people to take a look at the Temple Emanu-El Passover supplement. If you're saying, oh, I haven't seen it yet, and it's because it hasn't been made yet, because I'm waiting for people to submit their answers. The Temple Emanu-El basically, it's a handful of questions. It's morphed into a few more. I think it's 7 total questions. So for the people who already did it, they can fill it out again. Where people ask questions like, what's your favorite moment in the Seder? What's your personal favorite Seder memory? What does redemption and a redeemed world actually look like? B, what can you do to help create that redeemed world? Do you have any personal traditions for your own family that you are going to miss or try to replicate this year? And my vision for this program, for people submitting these answers, is I want to combine everyone's answers, and we can send it out to the congregation. And then people can say, like, as you're sitting there at the Seder table, a Seder for one, for example, you're not by yourself. You can say something like, oh, Bob Fishman's favorite part of the Seder is Karpas because it reminds him that spring is right around the corner, right? Beth's favorite Pesach memory is when Uncle Saul, I don't know, I'm trying to, you know what I mean. Someone shared different memories of things that happened at their Seders, but I think it allows you to feel like you're with other people at Seder, even if they can't physically be there. And we all have something that we can contribute to this, right, and to this enterprise. And hopefully you too will be inspired by it. Pesach can also be an opportunity of just learning something new, right? This can be a chance of having focus and say, I always wanted to learn X, Y, and Z. I'm going to read that book that I've always been waiting for. It gives you 8 days of figuring out who you are. Is it going for walks? Is it learning to cook new recipes? Is it really pushing yourself to focus on something, a different spiritual element of the holiday? And then finally, I want to focus on TETV. For people who, I want to remind everyone, and this is the pivot that I'm asking people to make. And everyone is talking about the Seder nights. And it's true, not having access to friends and family on the Seder night is hard. If you only focus on loss, then all you have is loss. And so I want us to simultaneously hold that loss in one place and also pivot and be aware of all the things the shul is doing and how we're ramping up our TETV programming for the month of Nisan and for Pesach in particular. And I really want to thank the clergy who are teaching and stepping up, and Rabbi Flan and Judy Kay and Bruce Phillips and Rabbi Confer, who are all offering to teach classes, who answered the call to teach classes and be part of TETV at the 8 a.m. and the 5:45 Zman Kodesh, the sacred times, where we have a chance to recite the Misha Berach for Cholim and also have a chance to recite the prayer in lieu of Mourner's Kaddish. But we're ramping it up to have themed lunches where we can have show off your pet lunch, a themed lunch where we invite people who have pets. You can talk about them and show them off to the community. Knitting moments, binge-worthy books and movies and things like that. And I want to thank Sharon and Shosh, Sharon Stock and Shoshana Jacob, who are really serving as the new TV producers, finding slots and speakers. My brother-in-law, Eitan Hirsch, is speaking about his new book. We're having the Antique Jewish Roadshow where people can present some of the Judaica in their house. Hopefully have another Moth radio evening where people can share personal stories. And so this is how the shul is saying, look, it's not all about the Seder, right? Pesach can be the whole month of Nisan can be lots of evenings of learning and connecting and laughing. And you should use these things. Without using names, I can point to people who have met at our lunch bunch and gotten a chance to know each other. And all the years of coming to Emanu-El, you never had a chance to connect and meet. And I think one of the neat experiences that can come from this process is how lovely after, when we can all go back to shul, whenever that is, and all of a sudden it's not just you're going back to see the people who you have missed, who you knew you were going to miss on the last day you went to shul, but you now have a whole collection of new friends and new people to talk to. I think that can be a really beautiful thing. I'm going to look at my comments here. Audrey asks, is there a kosher for Pesach peanut butter or just the usual brands? And there, you can look at the list from Abadi and you can see which brands he recommends. And some of the brands he recommends are things that you can just find off the shelf, like very basic kind of things. When I was at my old shul, we were talking about kitniot and kitniot derivatives. And so a generation or two ago, for example, peanuts are kitniot. Peanuts were forbidden if you kept kitniot, but the derivatives, peanut oil, was permissible. And somehow raise your hand if you grew up with peanut oil on Pesach. Yeah, right. Now, right? And so I once joked with, I said to David Lerner, my co-rabbi, I said, we can enlist the preschool students. We can buy whole peanuts. They can shell them, and then we can make our own Temple Emanu-El kosher for Passover peanut butter. But once we started looking at the cost of like buying a masher and the shelling and the allergy situation, we scrapped that idea. Okay, hold on. There's one called Family Haggadah that's available on Kindle. Hold on. Is there a PDF Haggadah you can recommend? I will be Zooming with my kids and want to share so everyone can participate. Yes, the RA Feast of Freedom Haggadah. Do any of you use it, the Feast of Freedom? It has commentary down the right and left margin. Anyway, that one was published by the conservative movement around the year 300 CE or so. That one is available. It's a joke, folks. Right? That one is available for free. In the email I sent out a few days ago, it has links to all kinds of different Haggadot that you can print for free. And you can actually customize them and things like that. So that's where you can find different Haggadot that everyone can use. Beth is saying there's one called the Family Haggadah that's available on Kindle. My family happens to have the print copy already, but I don't. So I purchased the Kindle version and took screenshots of it. Oh, there's a Passover Haggadah. Thank you, Marilyn. That's the one I'm talking about. I just thought I'd mention that there are some available as ebooks as well. That is correct. And also, we are thinking of launching something, a suggestion we received of if there are people who have extra Haggadot in their home and they want to share them with other people, almost have like a Haggadah swap. That's something that we can entertain as well. All right, Rabbi Fel, can you say more about utensils and dishes? Is the leniency about letting them sit unused for 24 hours only for non-porous things? Yes, it's only for non-porous things. That's what the guide said. Hold on a second. And Rabbi Zarin is joining us. Everyone say hi. You can wave to Rabbi Zarin, who was just teaching out our Teen Beit Midrash. And that's one of the nice things about having other clergy who can teach and work with, so we can help and be present for all the different parts of our community at the same time. Let me find this for a second. Pots and pans. Yes, this technique can also be used for cutlery and non-porous dishes as well. So I hope you have lots of non-porous dishes. Okay, Rabbi Zarin, I'm going to unmute you so you can chime in whenever you want. Where are you? There you are. Okay. Hi, Rabbi Zarin.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so let's go to this step. That's kitniot, nullification, menus, eat whatever, whenever, TETV. And the final step, which is the presentation part of this. We're all doing the best we can, right? Like this is where people are going to be talking about this time period, and people will say, where were you in 2020 during the COVID-19 shelter in place or whatever was going on, right? This is going to be one of those moments where everyone is figuring out what are we supposed to be doing and how do we do it. And I think we also need to just be patient with each other. We're all doing the best we can, and that's okay, right? I think the question is, what is the right choice for us right now? And who knows, maybe things will change in 3 days and all of a sudden, like it all disappears and we all go back and then it'll be different. So yeah, what's the right choice for right now? And that'll be different for who we are based on where we are in life and where we are theologically, philosophically, and all of those things. So I guess the main question, and I'll reiterate it one more time, is let's not recreate what we've always done. Let's make this year's Passover different, special, and memorable. I hope we've been able to find different ways of making it different, special, and memorable. I know on Tuesday night, Rabbi Zarin and I are going to focus on Seder night. And so if you are trying to figure out what are you going to do on Seder night, how do you possibly have a Seder for one? We're going to have a conversation about that, about how do you make that evening meaningful and special, and how do you still feel like you're celebrating Pesach. With that, I'm assuming everybody is applauding at home. I can hear it coming in through my window. There we go. Thank you very much. And what I'll do is if people have questions or comments about our observations, Rachel and I are here to answer them or do the best we can. I will say that one of the greatest pieces of Torah I ever learned comes from my mom, who said, if you don't know the answer to something, just say, I don't know. And so more often than not, I'm guessing the answers to tonight's questions are going to be, I don't know, I need to look that up. And so it's not, Rabbi Zer and I are not dodging and weaving. We just might not know, and that's okay. And we will get an answer back to you as well. Yes, Bob Fishman.
Just like to say thanks for the presentation, kind of get my mind working a little bit. My mind doesn't work very well anyway. But the Seders won't be the same, I think, for anyone. Very few of us have a Seder alone. So I think that's a big thinking part of it for me. But what you said, I think a little bit we could talk about. Everything doesn't have to be different, though. I mean, for someone like me, I should have that fried matzah for breakfast because that's what I always have during Pesach.
That's right. Yes.
We shouldn't throw it all out just because it's all so different. It's also cluttered and unbelievable when you think of it. I mean, instead of 23 people, there'll be 3 people at our Seder. So, okay, but there's the other days, and there's everything else you do on it. All right, so you don't get up and go to work. Well, maybe you do. You go in the office. But what do you do normally? And that you should try to keep some semblance of normalcy in your Pesach.
Agreed. And I think if there are those traditional dishes that you like, and even if you say, what's the point of making matzah brai? It's just for me, right? You deserve it, right? You're worth it, right? People like you, right? And that, right? I think you're right, Bob. I think if there are things that you enjoy doing, do it. And if you are someone who wants to, if you love having a conversation about Pesach and it's just you and your spouse or you and a friend or you and someone else, have that conversation. Don't be afraid to make it meaningful, right? And if you want to call, if it doesn't work for you or you want to do a dinner not on Pesach night, but you also want to call another family unit not on Pesach and have dinner with them that week, do it, right? I think it's make it meaningful. Thank you, Bob. Other questions or comments? Looking around, I got to flip around. Let's see. Yes, Amy Olson. Oh wait, hold on. Oh, I'm trying to unmute you. Hold on.
There I go.
There you go.
If one normally has separate dishes for Passover, and this year is being a little bit more lenient with the food items in terms of hechsher or not hechsher, do the dishes get messed up? Or I'm just trying to decide which dishes I'm going to use if I am more lenient with the food.
So one approach is, so I'm not telling you to get non-hechsher. I'm not telling you to bring HAMETZ into your house, right?
Right. I'm not talking about HAMETZ. I'm talking about like the cream cheese that's not hechshered or whatever it is.
So to be clear, it should all be hechshered. It just doesn't have to have a kosher or Passover hechsher.
Uh-huh.
So this is a game, right? And Rabbi Zarin, feel free to weigh in. This is a game of how flexible do you want to be, right? And I remember if I were to tell you 15 different ways of making it okay to do X, Y, or Z, there are some things that just people don't want to do, right? And so, for example, if I say or feel uncomfortable doing, so if I were to say, listen, yeah, this is totally fine, and I'm doing it, right? I'm using my regular cream. I just bought regular Philadelphia cream cheese, and it's fine. And you say, Rabbi, no, I have to have my Tempty. Is it Tempty that the brand that everybody uses for Pesach? Yeah, that pink one, right? I just have to. If you don't use, it's not kosher. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I mean, do what feels comfortable, right? Because I don't want you to then look at your dishes and be like, why did I do this, right? My grandparents' Pesach dishes are now I can't look at them the same way anymore, right? So all of the leniencies I'm giving, all of the approaches I'm giving you, which are in some ways are more lenient than what we typically do, they are not wrong, right? Even people, for example, if you want to eat kitniyot this year, the kitniyot don't trape up your dishes, right? They can still be your Pesach dishes. There's no like you've gone too far and you can't redeem them or anything like that. One option, which is something that you could do if you wanted, you could say, I'm gonna buy. I don't want to do these things, right? Like I like Pesach a certain way. I'm gonna do these like this new approach for this year, but I don't want to touch my dishes. You could either use disposable, which I'm not a big fan of, personally speaking, just from the garbage part, or you could go buy a few plates, right? And then you could incorporate those into your regular eating for the rest of the year, right? That could be an approach for how you do this moving forward. Does that sound satisfactory?
Yeah, I just want to pursue that. So if kitniyot don't trafe up your dishes,
Yeah.
items that are kosher, but not necessarily marked kosher for Passover, might one be able to say that those don't trafe up your dishes either?
Not might one say that. I am saying that. that is correct, right?
I'm perfectly happy to have my whatever cream cheese that's kosher and not kosher for Passover. It's just a question of what I want to do with the dishes.
Yes. 1 second. We have expert. Where are you? Oh, this is like. Oh, there you are. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. Don't. There you go.
So
Go ahead.
I just want to make a difference between the items on the list of that the Abadi brothers put out and the RA list on the one hand, and just generically saying items that don't have a Passover hechsher, right? The RA has gone through and determined certain items that don't need a special Passover hechsher. The Abadi brothers go through and look at ingredient lists, call manufacturers to find out what else is produced on the same equipment to determine what is unlikely to have more than just the bare trace amounts of HAMETZ, such that if you buy it before Passover, it's kosher for Passover. If you're buying items from the Abadi list or the RA list, your dishes are completely kosher for Passover. Everything you're eating is kosher for Passover. And I would hope and encourage you to think of it in that way. And in fact, I think I articulated this to Rabbi Thel yesterday. The Abadi list isn't really a leniency, it's an undoing of extreme stringencies that have been put in place over the past several decades, particularly in the US. So if you're following those lists, then you're fine. Don't confuse that with saying, oh, anything that's kosher, even as long as it's hechshered but doesn't have a Passover hechsher, is okay, right? Because there are things that might not look like they have chametz on the ingredients list, but we know they're manufactured on equipment that has chametz on it right before or right after, or things like that, right? So make sure you're following one of those lists, your dishes are gonna be fine. Kitniyot, never make your dishes not kosher for Passover. In fact, in my family, if we eat kitniyot this year, it will be the first time we've done so on Passover. But we've cooked kitniyot on our Passover dishes before because, like, I don't know, what do you do for dinner the night before Seder when you don't want to eat matzah yet and you have to have something for dinner and your kitchen's already kashered, right? So, so you can absolutely cook kitniyot on your Passover dishes, again, as long as they meet the other requirements for being kosher for Passover.
And all of the directions for how to incorporate kitniyot into your life, all of this is very clearly spelled out in a link that I'm going to give you towards the end of this phone call. Because if I give it to you now, you're all going to be clicking on it and looking at it and all of that stuff. I will say this, okay, other comments, observations, questions? I'm looking around. Yes, Marilyn.
That's where paper dishes come in handy. Have a question, use paper dishes.
When in doubt, that's you can go with that route. Absolutely, that is a good approach. Yes. Other comments or observations? Things you want to know, Ronnie.
Maybe you're going to say this later or another time, but you mentioned, is there a way to, if we're having people in, like my kids in different places, would it be better to try the Zoom? And one of them doesn't have the iPhone. Does it have to be the iPhone with the Zoom, or can it be a computer, or how does that work?
So you'll be glad to know they're in the link that I'm going to send you. It actually has directions for how the RA suggests using Zoom or FaceTime or Google Hangouts, all of these different features. so people can sort of find the one that fits best and help give guidance about it. A word about that email that the Sephardi rabbis they said that you could use a Seder, that you could use Zoom for the Seder. The tshuva itself, or the approach itself, don't forget they have one night of Seder, not 2 nights. And I think there's a lot of aspects they want you to do ahead of time. So just be mindful of that. I also just want to voice that I think it's a complicated platform, not complicated as a bad thing, but nothing replaces being together, right? And so I want to set realistic expectations. That if your idea is like, we're all going to just Zoom together and it's going to be just like it always is, it's going to feel nice and it's going to have some of those things, but it's not the same. And even leading a Seder through, even having a class like this is different, right? It feels different than being in the same room and being present together. Other comments or observations? Looking at hands, let's see. Okay, wait, hold on, no, wait. Anyone? Yes, the Goldberg family.
Well, the good news is you don't have to do nearly as much cooking when it's only 2 people.
Amen.
It'll take a lot less time. And then we'll still be able to see each other through the miracle of Zoom. So we'll be together and we won't have to worry about, oh, that one doesn't like this food. Maybe I should make something else.
Yeah, there's also the issue. I mean, if you have lots of people over your house, how many of you have ever had Seder? And at the end of the Seder, you go up to one of your guests and you're like, oh, we didn't have a chance to really connect so much. I didn't have a chance to talk to you, right? If there's only 2 other people in the room, it makes having that excuse kind of challenging, right? So hopefully you'll really be able to connect more deeply with your guests. Any other observations, comments?
Well,
Yes.
a further answer to Ronnie's question is you can use Zoom on an Android phone.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
And we're using it on a computer. So as long as there's a microphone and a camera, it works.
Correct, correct. And you can download the apps for tablet or for phone. You can also, depending on what kind of an account you have, you can also just call in. And so if you would like to have someone at your Seder who is not so technically proficient or proficient in technology, they can just call in and they can listen to the Seder as well.
If you don't have an account, you're limited to 40 minutes.
And yeah, and if you have an uncle and aunt who just won't stop talking, you can always mute them, which also can be really empowering. All right. Yeah, go ahead. It says Derek, but it's not Derek. Go ahead.
What happens if you can't get a shank bone?
Ooh, excellent. In the link that I'm going to send you, it actually says, and I want to give you the answer because let me find it. Give me 1 second. 1 second, because I want to be able to tell you because it's such a good answer. And we're going to go over this more on Tuesday when Rabbi Zarin leads the conversation about Seder night. But give me a second because it's so good. Hold on. If you can't find an egg or a roasted shank bone, you could use a roasted beet and rice if you're using kitniot. You can use a roasted beet and rice if you consume kitniot in place of the shank bone. Just because it's so good, because where do they have that crazy tradition? In the Talmud. Let me go here. I'll show you this. This is, everybody really needs 1 sheet of matzah. Karpas can be any vegetable. In Israel, they use a boiled potato. For maror, if you can't find horseradish, you can use hot peppers, fresh ginger, mustard greens, raw lemon, and in Israel, they actually use romaine lettuce. And there you have the information for the egg and the roasted shank bone.
Lettuce is the most historically accurate vegetable to use for maror.
Whoa, are you saying that little jar of red horseradish?
In the 3rd century.
So look, friends, this is like a much bigger conversation about what's like authentically Jewish or what's the traditional way we do things. And we're going to see that a lot of things that we think are traditional and absolute are sometimes modern inventions. And by modern, I mean only 200 years old, right?
I actually have a magnet on my refrigerator that looks like a shank bone.
So you can put that right on there, but don't eat it. All right, any other comments? All right, so what happened? Yeah, Ronnie, are you raising your hand again?
Did you just say that you could use a roast piece of chicken or chicken bone as a shank bone if you don't have a shank bone?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Rachel, do you have an idea?
I have seen that done, and I have to say we've used that when we've had multiple Seder plates because our table's been so big. We've used that as the secondary, tertiary Seder plates. Look into that and have an answer by Tuesday. How about that?
Okay, thank you.
And of course, the answer is like the answer. Of course, is of course you can. Like, is there like a source for it? I don't know. We'll have to look it up, right? It's like, can you do it? Sure. Well, we will look that up. All right, my friends. The time is now 8:30, and I want to be. So here is there's going to be an email going out to the shul probably tomorrow with an actual link, but you can be among the first to have access to this. So I'm going to go in the chat box, 1 second, and I'm going to give you the link in case you don't have it. The first is from the Rabbinical Assembly, that document that I keep talking about. And I'm not saying it's the greatest thing that's ever been written, but it's up there, right? The first one is that link of the Rabbinical Assembly, where we can see preparing Pesach during time pandemic. And then the second one is the kashrut page that gives you access to the body list that we've talked about before. All right, and you can all start clicking on it and saying, oh my God, it's so wonderful, because it really is. All right, the other link I'm going to share with everyone, and even though you can see it, but I feel like one of the things that we're learning, the synagogue made an initiative to call all of our congregants, or most of our congregants, 70 and above. And one of the things that we learned is we don't always have the best data on all of our congregation. And the other thing that we learned is we can send out 1,000 emails, but people don't always know. So it's always helpful to have reminders so people can always see what we're doing. And then you can also talk about it as well. This is the link to TETV, where, sorry, I'll make more space. Yeah, there you go. That's the TETV link, so you can see all the different classes and teachings and offerings that we're doing. Hopefully you'll join tomorrow morning. I will be leading Zman Kodesh at 8 a.m. And then at 5:45, we'll hope you can join Rabbi Zeren, Cantor Meir, myself, and over 75 different computer screens, over 100 people bringing in Shabbat together. You can bring your candlesticks so we can all light them together before Shabbat comes to an end. And then we'll make Havdalah together on Saturday night as well. But lots of opportunities to connect with each other over the next couple of days. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes in case anyone has any extra questions or wants to say anything. But if you want to call it a night and go to bed, feel free to do that. But officially speaking, this meeting has come to an end. I hope you found something new, something interesting, and I wish you all a good night, and I hope I'll see you tomorrow night.